Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. I'm Cade Kennedy, joined by Connor Gray. Andrew Santangelo is not with us. He's busy covering something a little bit more important in Shawnee today. Our University, Northwestern Oklahoma State, winning their first volleyball postseason tournament game in a while, so big deal, obviously, for them, getting the win over Oklahoma Baptist. We don't talk about Northwestern a whole lot on the show, but it's a good day to talk about them. They actually won a game, so it's good to see.
Yeah, I had to work the radio station for that game, obviously tie line, but I decided to kind of just hang around the radio station since I didn't have a whole lot to do before Jazz Band. And I was so glad I was there because we went down one set and came back and won the next three.
Yeah, so a 3-1 win against a team you got swept by twice this year.
Oh, and
that was
weren't
fun.
Weren't they the number one team?
They were not the number one team. They were the number two team. But we have a little bit to get to today in the realm of college football. Of course, Tuesday and Wednesday, you had your Maction. Who doesn't love Maction? I love Maction. You love Maction. If you don't love Maction, there's something wrong with you. Well, we got some games tonight, of course, Tulsa, Memphis, Georgia Southern taking on Louisiana Lafayette. We're not going to get too much into those games as much as I'd like to talk Tulsa football and just, hey, look at the Golden Hurricane, they're okay this year, now's not the time to do that.
No.
What it is the time to do is get into the big boys, starting with the number one team in the country, Georgia, taking a trip to play, some other Bulldogs in Starkville, Mississippi State. Looking at this one, 16-point underdogs for Mississippi State, which makes sense considering how their season has gone. You've had some highs, you've had some lows. You had to survive against Auburn last week, 39-33 in overtime in a game where everything went right, then everything went wrong, then everything went right again. You just ride the wave there in that one. Mississippi State, I've seen a lot of people at the beginning of the year pick Georgia to lose this game just because, not that Georgia's the worst team, but because it's just so hard to go undefeated. They're going to slip up to somebody. However, now that we've gotten to this point in the season, I don't think that's the case for many of those people that made those predictions.
No.
I never really saw this as a game Georgia would lose.
No.
It's a Mike Leach team. They'll keep it interesting. They always do. Something weird will happen in this game. That's just going to happen when you have a team that throws the ball as much as they do. Will Rogers will make a good play at some point. But Georgia at 16, I still think they find a way to cover in this one.
Yeah, the team, there's teams that Georgia has played this year. I know it's they had wonky games at the beginning of the year, but ever since the Missouri game, they've been on point. I mean, last week they played Tennessee, who was riding off the hot wave of 2 weeks before beating Alabama. Then you go and beat Kentucky, beat them up, and then all of a sudden they get slapped by Georgia. So Georgia is just Georgia's going to take care of business for the most part. I think Stetson Bennett and company will do what they do enough on offense to get a good amount of points, and that defense is going to give Will Rogers all kinds of problems.
I mean, this is one of those that, Brock Bowers might absolutely destroy someone out there today. Georgia loves going to their tight ends, whether it be Bowers, whether it be, McConkey, whether it be somebody they can go to. Georgia has a lot of weapons. It's going to be a rough day for Mississippi State. The next one here, a lot worse. Number 2, Ohio State, hosting Indiana. This one's notable for one thing. Ohio State 40-point favorites in this game against Indiana. I would think we both agree Ohio State wins this game. I don't think we're going to call upset of the year of 3-win Indiana beating the Buckeyes. The bigger question.
Hey, you never know.
You never know. I don't think they're going to get the benefit of last week's weather from Northwestern.
No.
But I think the bigger question is, does Ohio State cover the 40?
I think they cover unless that offense comes out really slow for 2.5 quarters.
To me, this is one of those that, I would like to think Indiana covers this, just you look at some of these other games they've had here. Nebraska, obviously not a good team, but they played competitive with them. Michigan, very good team. It was a home game. They held it to only losing by 21. For Indiana, that's saying something this year. Mm-hmm. Maryland, close game. Rutgers, close game. Penn State, blowout, but it was still 31, not the monstrous number of 40. I think Indiana finds a way to get a garbage touchdown late to lose by 38, and that keeps them in it. Ohio State puts the backups in at some point. Ohio State is going to be frustrated. You only beat Northwestern by 14. That's where you're at. A double-digit win against them is still not a good feeling with how that game went.
I mean, at the end of the day, if Ohio State's still going to blame the elements, I'm like, then you got to change up your format. You should have beaten Northwestern by at least, I'll give you 28, maybe 30, 31 points, even with those conditions. Maybe just don't throw the football as much. But this, obviously, you're not going to deal with those kind of elements. I think Ohio State will just Stroud will have a great day, and that'll be the end of it.
I would think so if you're Ohio State that you could take care of business here in this one. The next one, it is Nebraska traveling to Michigan. Cornhuskers 31-point underdogs in this game. I believe I saw somewhere, and I don't know if this was correct or not, that Casey Thompson may be out for this game for Nebraska, which could definitely help with that total there. If that's the case, you're going to have Chuba Purdy probably starting at quarterback for the Cornhuskers there. I don't think it matters whoever you have starting there. Michigan's going to win this game. I think they can cover it. Showing what they did last week, Nebraska is still not there yet. They're making progress. They're finding ways to keep games close. I mean, where have we seen that before, considering where they started this year and where they ended it? But I still think Michigan finds a way to win and cover.
Yeah, Michigan pretty much covers. J.J. McCarthy and company are going to just score points. Maybe you might get some defensive scores. Just Nebraska, this is just basically taking Nebraska out to the woodshed and just bashing their brains in.
It was Blake Corum might try to find a way to run for 200 yards on this Huskers defense. It is not a great defense by any means.
I'd probably see a lot of running and a lot of yards.
I mean, that's the way Michigan wants to play. If they can just run the ball every single play, they would absolutely do it.
And I will say, it's like, if this was still a 40-plus, I would have say Michigan easily gets 40 on Nebraska. Unless Nebraska gets like 3 late garbage touchdowns. I have no idea.
Yeah, we'll have to see in this one. TCU goes to Texas, one of the bigger games of the week. Saturday night football in Austin, the college game day game. Everybody's eyes are going to be on this one. TCU 9-0, number 4 in the country, more of the miracle team that no one expected to be here. It's another edition of Is Texas Back, the game, the series, the franchise, whatever you want to call it. Texas 7-point favorites in this one if you go by Vegas.
It's mainly because it's in Austin. That's a lot of reason why. If this was in Fort Worth, either they'd still favor Texas by maybe 3 points, or it would go in favor of TCU. But overall, it's mainly because of the night game in Austin.
Yeah, so it's going to be a good environment for sure at DKR. This is going to be a fun game because you saw what Texas did against Oklahoma State. You saw what they did against Kansas State. It looked like two completely different teams out there, night and day performances. You look at TCU, they're starting to struggle a bit the last 2 weeks. Granted, they're still winning by double digits, but the way they've had to play these games, this has been their whole season. They go to West Virginia. It's a tough game. They pull away late at the end.
It's also in a game in Morgantown where a lot of teams struggled. I mean, Baylor, who has been mostly a solid team, lost in Morgantown, and that's just the magic of Morgantown being that. And Tech's a good team. Tech is a good team. So it's like seeing them kind of struggle with Tech. I'm like, OSU did it. K-State did it, though I think they actually managed to beat them up. But it's just like, you think is you played multiple games against ranked teams before the West Virginia game. You had to come back from behind against Oklahoma State. You win that game. You had to do the same thing with K-State. I understand their circumstances, injuries, which probably you're lucky that happened and that saved your season. But even then, it's still like they find ways to win. That's basically what it comes down to. And it's like the one with West Virginia, hard game, but you had to go to Morgantown for that one. And then against Tech, that's a good Tech team that's played good with almost everybody except for maybe one or two teams this year.
Yeah, the Tech game was, I think, more infuriating for TCU fans, where you had opportunities to pull away in that game, but could just never fully take advantage of it there.
I will say they were up at 34-17, so that late score for Tech is kind of deceiving.
Yeah, they had opportunities, I know, in the first and second quarter where you had some interesting play calls that you decided to run with. But to me, this is one of those that as much hype as Texas is going to get, as much hype as TCU has had, starting to slowly build, we're seeing it now, I think the Frogs come out and win this game. I think they find a way. They thrive in these big game type of situations. They always have. this is going to be one of those that I think the Frogs find a way to do it.
Key thing is to get pressure on Quinn Ewers when he's throwing the football. Do what you can to stop Bijan Robinson. I know that's the first major threat right there. But if Ewers is going back to pass, you pressure him, he's just going to get rid of it. He's too scared to take a sack or try to do something with his legs a lot of the time. He usually doesn't run with the football, and if he does, it's because there's wide open space. But otherwise, Quinn Ewers is probably going to get rid of the football, while Duggan will be willing to put his body on the line to help the TCU Horned Frogs win. Hopefully I just didn't jinx him on that one. But overall, I think what's going to happen is Texas will have the lead for about over half the game, and TCU plays catch up and just has all the momentum going into the fourth quarter and beats Texas.
That's kind of
go
what
10-0.
That's what I'm kind of thinking. This is going to be one of those. Texas will come out, they'll play good, they'll have a great first half. TCU will make the adjustments they need to, and you'll see the Frogs slowly come back, catch them about midway in the fourth quarter. Insert critical error for Texas, no matter it be offense, defense, or special teams, and TCU runs away with it after that.
Yeah, I'm going to look at it. It's going to be similar to the Oklahoma State game. That game was in Stillwater, but OSU had to come from behind and score 21 points just to win the game. But I'm thinking of Tech game, whatever. But, yeah, this is one where Texas just can't finish a game. I think for some reason, because it seems like they've always done in games where as the game goes on, they just give the ball to Bijan Robinson less and less, which makes no sense to me. He's the most dangerous running back in the nation. Use him to your fullest extent. But TCU, I think, will have, like we both agree, TCU will have momentum going to that fourth quarter and continue to go undefeated.
Yeah, so TCU, I think, will be 10-0, and we'll get a serious discussion about TCU making the playoffs. They're already in right now, but they can ride the wave and maybe jump up into that top three.
So all here's to hoping they can beat Texas.
Yep, and then Tennessee right behind them at number 5. The Volunteers taking on Missouri. Mizzou's a weird team. That's all I'll say about them, but they're 20.5-point underdogs in this game. Tennessee 20.5 is the favorite for them, and then only an over-under of 57, which surprises me a little bit, considering how great Tennessee's offense has been this season, considering how inconsistent Missouri has been this season. This could be one of those games. I'm not going to say Missouri wins by any means. They might cover, and that's about it. But don't be surprised if you look at this at halftime and go, that's a one-score game. I didn't expect to see that today. Missouri will do this to people. They did it to Georgia. They did it to Kentucky. They did it to South Carolina.
So big difference was with the one with Georgia, they were actually winning that game.
Yep.
So otherwise the other games were pretty much the same. But, yeah, I could see that. But, yeah, that second half, Tennessee's just going to slap them and win by, probably 20. I'll give them, 24.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Volunteers bounce back from their loss to Georgia. I mean, it's a big game for Tennessee from that perspective. You look at Missouri, you can't overlook them. You have 3 games you should win the rest of the season.
I mean, you're basically playing JV teams for the end of your schedule, and you just got to sit there and wait to see what happens.
Yeah. And then the big one on Fox Saturday night, number 25 Washington enters the Autzen Zoo to take on the Ducks. Oregon is number 6 in the country, and they're looking to prove that they're a little bit better than that ranking. So this is a big-time game for Oregon. You're 13-point favorites. Insert the meme about Bo Nix. He's a dark horse for the Heisman, having fun, that whole copy pasta there if you want to put it in there. This is a huge game for Oregon. I cannot tell you enough. This is one of the biggest games Oregon's going to have on their schedule. UCLA at home, of course, was huge, but this is a rivalry game with a Washington team that would love nothing more than to knock Oregon out again.
And play spoiler.
Yeah.
And as much as if Washington plays as capable as we think they can, and they've done it before, they'll give Oregon all kinds of problems, but top to bottom, Oregon is a much more sound team. Especially their offense is the best it's seen in years. It's kind of reminds me of some of how Chip Kelly's offenses used to be, where some high scoring, but now it's obviously different scenario, but still it's Washington is is just a wonky team at times where they'll play close with teams they shouldn't play close with and then beat up teams. But then again, it's like this is also the same Washington team that lost to Arizona State.
Yes.
So that's like the UCLA game. I'll give them that. That's a tough one to deal with, but you lost to Arizona State, but that's like 4 or 5 weeks ago. Much different. You've been playing better. You also went up against a good Oregon State team. That was a great game for them. Well, as Oregon's just taking care of business, taking teams out to the woodshed. So it's like this is one where it's like I could see this game being close in the first half, but Oregon over time pulls away in that second half.
See, I think Washington is going to shock people in this game. I don't say that Washington's going to win this game, but I think they are going to cover. This is going to come down right to the end, and this is going to be a valiant effort for the Huskies. They're going to play with anybody. That's how they've been all season. They're going to go right down to the wire with whoever they play, whether it be good or bad. That's how they want to play this year. Expect Penix to have a good game. He'll have his moments here and there. This is a fun Huskies team, but they're not good enough to beat Oregon.
Yeah, I just don't think he'll be enough to beat Oregon.
And then LSU coming off a huge win, the current leader of the SEC West, still not a sentence I thought I would say this year, 3.5-point favorites on the road for that golden boot against Arkansas. We've seen this scenario before. How many times? Highly ranked team for LSU comes into Fayetteville, and Arkansas having a season where you know they're better than their record is. They just have some really weird games that they lose. And what a shocker. Arkansas lost a really weird game to Liberty last week. LSU's flying high. The upset potential is there. Can Arkansas pull it off?
That's a hard one to say because in many ways we would have thought the records would have been reversed.
Yeah, I would have expected this to be a giant game for Arkansas, but when the season started, I should say.
Yeah, well, that's what we were thinking at the beginning of the season, and when thinking Arkansas would be the challenger to the SEC West, and it turned out it's not them, it's LSU, who just happens to Brian Kelly's just done. I don't know what he's done with that team, but all of a sudden they're just playing the best football they can play. And obviously, you come off against Big Win in Death Valley against Alabama. Now you have to head to Fayetteville. This one, it's really hard to say because the upset potential is right there for Arkansas to just get one on LSU. But I think LSU, at the end of the day, will be able to pull out a victory. It'll be a close game. I'm going to say it's a close, bit of small, high-scoring game. But LSU, at the end of the day, is a better top down to bottom team, and they will get the victory.
I think this is going to be a shootout for sure. These are two fun teams to watch. Even though Arkansas has been extremely inconsistent at times, they will find a way to make this close, but I think LSU ekes them out and gets that win. Mm-hmm. But the big one, Alabama, Ole Miss, somebody's got to lose in this one, and someone is going to be third in the SEC West when they do. Tide are 12-point favorites, and I'm not buying that for a second. 12-point favorites in Oxford. I know that Alabama on the road this year has not been in a elite situation that we're used to seeing them. Not even great half the time, I would say.
It's like if you look at some of their games on the road, and it's just like
they're night and day.
It's like night and day. It's like one of those things like. They struggle with Texas. I know that was way earlier in the year, but still, then they kind of have their defensive woes against Tennessee, where that elite defense that they're supposed to have basically was nothing against Tennessee. Basically, it took Bryce Young being the miracle worker to actually at least make that game competitive, which it was down to the wire. And then you have a not so great. Then Bryce Young doesn't play up to what he can against LSU, and they lose in Death Valley. This is one of the things. Oxford is a very hostile environment, especially to teams like Alabama, and they've had the worst stroke of luck. I'd say Alabama, years past has had the worst stroke of luck against Ole Miss. I mean, they had a big one, I think 14 or whatever, and they had one the very next year or 2 years afterwards. So it's like Ole Miss, in many ways, out of all the teams in the conference, has had their number.
Never forget the legend of Chad Kelly. The legend of Swag Kelly and Bo Wallace, back-to-back years, getting big wins over Alabama. As much fun as it would be for a lot of people to see Ole Miss beat Alabama and the Tide fall to 7-3, I don't think it's going to happen.
This game's going to be a shootout.
It will.
It's going to be a big shootout, especially if Ole Miss plays what they're capable of playing. But if that offense gets shut down, Alabama could actually just roll them. But I'm going to say it's a shootout, and Alabama just survives.
Yeah, I think Jackson Dart will play well, but he'll make a mistake or two late in the game. We'll see Bryce Young be Bryce Young for a reason, and Alabama will win this game. It'll be tough, though. Ole Miss will cover. I don't think that Alabama's winning this one by more than 12.
I'd say I'd give them maybe 6.
Yeah.
6 points at most.
It's going to be a close game for sure. Alabama, I think, takes it, though. Louisville going to Clemson. Tigers are 7-point favorites back at home in Death Valley. But, man, Clemson is in a struggle. They're in that game where you lost to Louisville. You lost to the team before Louisville, Notre Dame. It's going to be a battle. Louisville's not a bad team.
No.
They upset Wake Forest a few weeks ago. They have proven that they can win these types of games. Can Louisville do it?
I think they can.
They have the quarterback. They have Malik Cunningham. He's their leading passer and their leading rusher. This is a Louisville team that, I mean, what a tale it's been. I mean, you look at the last 5 games here. You lose to Boston College. People are wanting Satterfield fired. You go upset a top 10 team. You beat James Madison, who was playing with fire earlier this year, 1.5-0. And now here you are trying to win it again, playing another number 10 team.
Yep. And it's just one of those things with Clemson. I feel like, I don't know. Do we even know if DJ still going to start for Clemson?
I would think so. I would think, considering what happened at the end of that game where Klubnik came in and then immediately got pulled after one drive, he threw an interception, DJ came back in, I would think DJ would start. Yeah. But I would not be surprised if he struggles early again, they go right back to Klubnik.
I feel like just the way things have gone the last few weeks for DJ, I'd probably see him getting benched again and then might have to come back off the bench, or depending on how things go. But Louisville has been playing overall versus Clemson has been playing better and better football, while Clemson went from playing great football to they over time after Boston College have just they've struggled and struggled. They've had games where they should have lost, especially with Syracuse, and then they lost to Notre Dame.
Yeah, the big factor to me is Clemson is at home, and that does make a difference in that stadium.
In many ways,
Death Valley is an incredible atmosphere. Even though it's a 2:30 game, it's not the big night game you're used to seeing there. Clemson will find a way to win. It might take the effort of everybody on that offense and defense coming together, but I think they find a way to squeeze out like a 3-point win.
I disagree with that. If the offensive woes still keep happening, Louisville is going to win this game by like 13. Like, Louisville is just has been playing much better football than Clemson has as a unit. Especially, looking at some of those points, Louisville's been able to score with not really much issues, while as Clemson, last week didn't go so well. Their defense gave up a lot of points. Like, their defense is averaging around like 25, 26 points a game. I understand that's not terrible by any standard, but it's like for the elite defense that they're supposed to have, their offense is really not helping them out on that.
Yeah. It'll be fun to see, though. That we can guarantee. It should be a fun game. The next one here, Arizona taking on UCLA. Bruins are 20-point favorites in this one. Arizona, I mean, a team of, you look at it week after week after week, just a gauntlet they're having to run through right now. Oregon at Washington, USC at Utah, at UCLA. Arizona, I think they're a little bit better than their record shows just because of all that you've had to play. That all being said, though, I think UCLA still wins this game.
Yeah, I think UCLA's offense will jump on Arizona. Arizona will play some catch-up to try to make that game close, but at the end of the day, UCLA wins that game.
Yeah, it'll be another fun run for DTR and the Bruins.
Actually, I think Wildcats actually will lose by less than 20.
I would not be surprised. UCLA, their inability to put teams away, it's not going to bite them this week, but we saw it against Arizona State. We've seen it before. It's going to bite them one of these games. I don't think it's this one, though.
No.
The next one, North Carolina going to Wake Forest. 2 weeks ago, this would have been the opposite scenario. We're talking about a top 15 Wake Forest with nothing to lose, trying to get back in that ACC race. But now it's a top 15 North Carolina, 8-1, coming into Winston-Salem, trying to survive. Mm-hmm. Because if they win, they're more than likely going to the ACC title game, setting up a battle with the Tigers. But if they lose, which Vegas has Wake Forest as a 4-point favorite, things could get wacky. We saw this 2 years ago when North Carolina played Wake here, and it was a big upset then. It might happen again.
Maybe, and I expect with these programs, especially the last couple of years, games they've had where it's been huge shootouts where it seems like someone's getting upset. I could easily see Wake Forest upsetting North Carolina in another shootout, which obviously recently why it's 77.5. Not kind of surprised it's not almost 100 because that's how good these teams can score on each other, especially some of the defenses are lacking, especially Wake Forest's defense is lacking in a lot. But I think at the end of the day, I think North Carolina will pull out a victory and manage to keep going and insert themselves into the title game.
See, I don't really know how to feel about this game because each team is the same issue. Their offense, really good. Drake May, fantastic. Sam Hartman, fantastic for most of the year. But those defenses, though.
They're so bad.
I mean, this game is an over-under of 77.5, and for good reason. I mean, not financial advice. Keep that in mind. We're not a financial advice betting show. But I would take the over in this one. Mm-hmm. This is a crazy game every year, usually first to 50 wins it. I think North Carolina takes it. Hartman, I mean, he's had 9 interceptions this year, and you can make the case that 2/3 of them have come in the last 2 games. He has struggled a little bit against NC State and a lot against Louisville. But it's going to be a battle, but I'm going to ride with the hotter team in North Carolina. That's not a sentence I thought I'd say earlier this year, but it's fun how football changes.
Things can change really quickly in football.
Absolutely. Speaking of change, UCF taking on Tulane, a top 25 matchup for one. Tulane is number 17 for 2. UCF and Tulane, my goodness, what a game in the American. People thought this might get game day. Tulane tried as hard as they could to push for this. They didn't get it. Well, I guess they got to take their frustration out on UCF. Green Wave, 1.5 favorite in this one. UCF, I mentioned on Tuesday's show, they've switched quarterbacks. Mikey Keene should be the starter for this one, I would think. They led them to victories over Cincinnati and Memphis. If you're looking at the Green Wave, though, they're still going to be rolling with their normal lineup here with Michael Pratt in charge. This is going to be a fun game. I know not a lot of people are going to watch it. It's 2:30 on ESPN2, but this is going to be a fun game.
Oh, it most definitely is, especially if you want some great offensive performances. You're probably going to get them out of Tulane and UCF, especially just Tulane. Just it's like we saw something in them that they could be at this point with Pratt as their quarterback, and it's happening. They're one of the best teams in the American, and you can make a case for them to, if they ever wanted to leave the American, they're like, we can. That'd be a team to go after, especially with the way they've been playing. But on to the game. This one, it's like Tulane's favored, and rightfully so, especially the way they played the last few weeks. So obviously, some of their games, they've pretty much have put teams away for the most part. I know the game against Memphis, they let them get back in the game after scoring 38 in that first half and just kind of just sat on the ball a lot of time. But Tulane can score. They can score on anybody, and I don't think it's going to be much different. It's great. I think this will be a shootout. I feel like the over-under should be a little higher, but I think Tulane finds a way to win.
I think they do as well. This is going to be the biggest game I can think of for Tulane since 1998. This is the game. Yeoman Stadium will be packed. It'll be rocking. But they already have that experience, Tulane does. They had this type of crowd when they played Memphis. They're getting used to it now. they're ready for this big game scenario. They already beat K-State on the road this year. They have that big win. If they don't lose to Southern Miss, we're talking about Tulane, as that, Cincinnati UCF type of position for the last few years of, oh, hey, if they went out, I mean, they're undefeated.
Well,
unfortunately, we can't do that. You lost to Southern Miss, but man could dream. So I think Tulane finds a way to pull this one off.
I think the way they would even get that shot to even try to make the playoff, which the committee isn't going to wouldn't let them, but they'd have to basically, like you said, not lose to Southern Miss if we could somehow change that. But at the end of the day, it's like they're going to probably make a New Year's Six Bowl, at least the one that has where they'll just get an automatic bid. A team gets an automatic bid to whatever that's not selected by like the Fiesta Bowl or something like that. You could see them possibly going there. I don't know, but it depends on what they obviously decide to do at the end of the day. But Tulane does take the victory.
I think so too. It'll be fun to watch though. It's weird seeing Tulane as the higher ranked team in this game. But, man, just what they have had this season, if you haven't seen this Tulane team yet, you need to see them. This is a fun team to watch. I saw a prediction earlier this week of LSU playing Tulane in the Sugar Bowl, and I just want to say I don't know how I'd feel about that. That'd be such a fun game. Two Louisiana teams battling it out in New Orleans would be such a fun time. But the next one here, Kansas State taking on Baylor. Bears are 2.5-point favorites in this one. Kansas State, they fell apart a bit last week against Texas. At times they're getting blown out by the horns, but a late rally turns it into a one-possession loss. But Baylor, they're finding their footing again. They beat Kansas. They beat Texas Tech. They beat Oklahoma. Baylor's on their way back, and if they win this game, Baylor controls their own destiny to the Big 12 title game.
Yep, and for K-State, lose this one, you pretty much goes that dark horse season that I was saying that they were going to have. But yeah, Baylor's on a much better roll. I mean, you beat KU up at home, then you get a huge victory in Lubbock, and then you go into Norman. Your defense pretty much kept you ahead of the game, and you stayed ahead. Obviously, it was just kind of Baylor seemed to just run all over OU, and obviously they're a run team. So that's one thing. I think you have two teams that love to run the football. Obviously, Shapen didn't have his best game last week, but Shapen can also, if you need him to, he'll throw the football really well, and that can happen. And K-State, obviously you have two good quarterbacks with Martinez and Howard. Last week, we both agreed Tuesday that Howard should have had the start because he was a more hot hand, and I think he was a much better equipped to go against Texas. But this one, Martinez is perfectly fine. This is one that you want. Both teams are going to try to beat each other through the run game, and in many ways, I think it favors K-State more since obviously you have a running quarterback and you have Deuce Vaughn. And as much as Baylor has obviously gone off a hot hand, I think K-State bounces back and they beat Baylor.
See, to me, I see the opposite of this. I see Baylor's improved. Their defense has forced 8 interceptions the last 2 games. Kansas State knows that. They're going to keep it more on the ground. I would think so. However, that combination of Richard Reese and Squirrel Williams, if you haven't seen those two, this Baylor team looks a lot different than they did getting beat in Morgantown. And like we talked about, Morgantown's just a scary place to play in the Big 12. You don't want to.
No matter what time of day it is, you don't want to play there.
You don't like playing there. But these two teams, I think they're pretty evenly matched in what they like to do. But this is one of those games. Baylor, to me, their biggest weakness is their secondary. Their rushing defense up front, they can get big, they can get physical with you. K-State can do the same thing. This is going to be big versus big, power versus power. And at the end of the day, I like Baylor's power a little bit more being at home. I think the Bears find a way to get the win. And we've got to talk about Baylor TCU next week as a huge game in the Big 12.
I mean, either way, it's going to be a huge game.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be big either way. But if Baylor's 7-3, they're going to be fighting back to try to get that second spot. It'll be fun either way, though. Notre Dame goes to Navy, and by goes to Navy, I mean they're playing in Baltimore because Navy never hosts this game. They always just defer to current large stadium, which I don't blame him. You want to get as many people as possible to see it.
Get as many people, many Navy fans, or even just the Navy Academy, and then Irish fans to come in.
Yeah. Navy struggling this year, though, 3-6. However, we know how this story goes. It's the Triple Option Service Academy. You can never underestimate a Triple Option Service Academy. I don't care who you are. They're difficult to deal with. You can ask Alabama when they were tied with Citadel at 10 at halftime. You can ask Notre Dame literally any of the last few years they've played Navy. You can ask OU when they played Army, and the same for Michigan. You don't like playing the service academies.
No.
Notre Dame will struggle for a little bit in this game. That's going to happen. Notre Dame, I think, will win comfortably towards the end of it. But that first quarter, I'm just going to let you know, it's going to be funny for about a solid 7 minutes, which is how long Navy's first drive is probably going to be. It's going to be funny. We're going to go, oh, my goodness, this is the team that beat Clemson? Really? And then Navy's going to fall apart because they'll turn it over once or something, and Notre Dame will figure it out. But that Irish defense, they're solid. They're a solid group. Mm-hmm. They're figuring it out. Everything is coming together for Notre Dame. They're going to win this game, and they're going to try to find a way to still get that 10-win season.
Mm-hmm. Can't really say much else about it. I think Notre Dame will get the victory eventually over Navy. Really
however, if Notre Dame loses, that means they respect the troops, and I would be very proud of them if they'd lost that game. We always respect the troops. It's Veterans Day. It'll be literally the day after Veterans Day. How can you not respect the troops and lose to Navy? What are you doing, Notre Dame? You got to take one for the team, guys. But the next one to talk about here, the final game we're going to get to today, Florida State going to Syracuse. What a season it has been for both these teams. And, I mean, you look at the last 5 mirror images of each other, including losses to Clemson being the changing point in their season. Florida State, you lost 3 in a row. You came back, blew out Georgia Tech, and absolutely dismantled Miami. Always what you want to see if you're a Noel fan. For Syracuse, it's the other way around. You came into that Clemson game flying high. You just beat NC State. You lose that game in Death Valley, you lose to Notre Dame, and then you get beat up by Pitt. It has been a rough slide for the Orange, but if you're Florida State, you're 6-3, you're flying high, you're 7-point favorites in this one. 2 teams trying to get their season back on the right track. Florida State seems to have found their footing. Syracuse needs to find it again.
It's mainly the offensive woes got to get better you got to stop for Syracuse in order to really for them to really be in it, and that defense has got to step up a little bit. Otherwise, it's pretty much what it might be a repeat of some of the last 3 games, except probably might be more closer. Florida State, obviously, on the right track. Their offense is getting it together. That defense is only given up 19 points in the last 2 games. It's like as much. I mean, I've enjoyed seeing. I enjoyed the ride of Syracuse doing good this year, but at the end of the day, I think Florida State will win in Syracuse.
I think so, too. Florida State, they found it. Whatever it is they're trying to get to, you look at the end of their schedule here, you've still got Syracuse, you still have Florida. This is a team that could easily finish out and have a great end of the season. This is a fun team. Jordan Travis is slowly developing into that guy. This is a Florida State team. I'm not going to say this year, obviously, being 6-3 right now. Next year, we'll have to talk about them again in a little bit different light.
You kind of need to because Florida State, obviously, huge brand in college football, especially for the history that they have. But it's like the fact that they're finally putting together a winning season, or at least a good season this year, after years of
torment from Jimbo Fisher and Willie Taggart.
The ghost of Jimbo there. But basically,
this is what happens when you don't give him $11 million.
But it's just like Florida State finally has put it together. They're back. I think they're back to being a solid team. Are they back to Florida State? We've known for years. No, not close. But they're getting there.
Yeah.
Give them probably maybe a couple more years, and they'll be back to being one of the better teams in college football.
Norvell knows what he's doing. You can trust the process. I know trust the process is a fun meme to say, depending on where you're from. You got to believe in him. I think Florida State fans are. They've been having a fun season. But as always, we thank you for tuning in. Once again, a bit shorter show this week, having to do that with some flexible schedules, trying to get everything working. As always, we We appreciate you for tuning in, those of you watching right now. If you're watching live on Twitch, of course, follow us here at twitch.tv/NWTV7. If you're watching this later on YouTube, of course, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment below. Always helps with the algorithm. Spread the word. Show anyone else this show if you want to. Always appreciated. And as always, if you don't want to follow us on Twitter, but still want to know, or follow us on Twitch and still want to know when we go live, you can follow us at Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at NWTV7. Until next time, for Connor Gray, I am Cade Kennedy saying have a great weekend, everybody.